If you ever stay at the Crescent Hotel in Arkansas and the night clerk quietly asks you not to take the stairs down to the basement, listen to them, because that basement was not built to store luggage. It was not built to store old furniture. It was built to store bodies. In 1937, a man with no medical license, no degree, and no real training walked into this 5-star hotel and turned it into a hospital for the dying. He promised a cure for cancer, no surgery, no pain, no risk. Desperate families believed him. They handed over their life savings. They carried their dying loved ones up that hill, into that lobby, onto that elevator. And many of them never came back down the front stairs. They came down the other way, through the basement. This is the true story of Norman Baker and the hotel that, almost 90 years later, still won't let its dead leave. Before any of this, the Crescent Hotel was something beautiful. Built in 1886, high on a ridge above the small town of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It was carved from white limestone, with wraparound balconies, marble floors, and views that stretched across the Ozark Mountains for miles. It was a resort for the wealthy, a place to escape to. For decades, the worst thing that happened inside its walls was a missed dinner reservation. But buildings don't remember their good years. They only remember what's done to them. And in 1937, something was about to be done to this one that it would never recover from. He arrived dressed in lilac suits, driving a custom purple car with a voice built for radio and a smile built for selling. His name was Norman Baker. Years earlier in Iowa, Baker had already run one fake medical operation. He had no license to practice medicine, no formal training. What he had was a radio station, a gift for performance, and a complete lack of conscience. Iowa officials eventually shut him down and ran him out of the state. Most men would have stopped there. Baker didn't stop. He simply looked for somewhere new to start again. Somewhere desperate enough, broke enough, to look the other way. He found it in Eureka Springs. The town was struggling. Tourism had dried up. The Crescent Hotel itself was failing, half empty, hemorrhaging money. Baker bought it for almost nothing. And he didn't just buy a hotel, he bought a stage. And he was about to perform the cruelest show of his life, with real patients and a body count. Baker stood in front of cameras, microphones, newspapers, and told the world something extraordinary. He had found it. The cure for cancer. No operation, no radiation, no pain. Just his formula, his tonic. Think about what that meant in the 1930s. Cancer wasn't survivable for most people. There was no chemotherapy as we know it. A diagnosis was, for many families, a death sentence with a short countdown attached. And then this man, confident, charismatic, dressed like a movie star, appears, telling them there's another way. Families didn't have the luxury of skepticism. They had a dying mother, a dying husband, a dying child. So they paid him thousands of dollars. Money some of them didn't have, money some of them borrowed, money some of them would never see returned in any form except a body to bury. They packed up their loved ones and brought them up that long hill into that beautiful lobby, believing they were walking into a hospital. They were walking into something else entirely. Here is what actually happened once the doors closed behind them. The tonic patients were given wasn't medicine. It was found to be nothing more than a colored liquid. No proven cancer-fighting properties at all. A lie, bottled and sold by the gallon. As patients grew weaker, not stronger, Baker and his staff didn't stop. The bills kept coming. The treatments kept continuing. The hope kept being sold, week after week, even as the people buying it grew thinner, paler, quieter. And when a patient finally died, and it happened again and again and again, there was no dramatic announcement to the family waiting down the hall. The body was simply moved down a back stairwell into the basement, into a room built specifically for this purpose, complete with an autopsy table and a walk-in cooler meant to hold the dead until they could be quietly removed from the building, away from the eyes of the next hopeful family checking in upstairs. Imagine that hallway. The lobby still smells like fresh flowers. A pianist might be playing somewhere. And 2 floors below, in the dark, a man who once believed he was getting better is lying on a steel table, already gone. More than 40 deaths are documented from the hospital's 3 years of operation. Some researchers who later studied the case believe the true number of patients who came to the Crescent and were never accounted for again, never confirmed alive, never confirmed dead, simply gone from the record, could be far higher. Some estimates run into the hundreds. No one was ever charged with their deaths. Former staff who worked there during the Baker years described things that had nothing to do with medicine. Late-night sounds from the basement when no living patient was scheduled to be there. Gurneys being wheeled down empty corridors at hours when the hospital should have been silent. A cold that settled into certain rooms that no fireplace or radiator could push back. At the time, it was easy to explain away. Old building, strange acoustics, tired nerves. But staff who left the hospital, and many did, unable to stomach what they were part of, carried those stories with them for the rest of their lives. They didn't call it haunted. Not yet. They just called it wrong. Something about the building had gone wrong the moment Norman Baker walked through its doors. Baker was careful. He kept layers of doctors and assistants between himself and the patients, so that if anyone ever came asking questions, his own name stayed just out of reach. It worked. For a while, authorities in Arkansas tried to shut him down and failed. The hospital was bringing real money into a town that desperately needed it, and Baker had local support because of it. It took the federal government to finally end him. Not for the deaths, not for the false cure, for the mail. Baker had sent hundreds of thousands of pamphlets across the country, advertising his fake treatment through the postal system. That, mail fraud, was the charge that finally stuck. In 1940, a court ruled his cure exactly what it always was, a complete and total hoax. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. He appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. He lost. For every family who had buried someone after trusting him, it was the only consequence he would ever face. No murder charge, no reckoning for the basement, just a fraud conviction, 4 years, and his name fading into history. The hotel sat afterward like a wound that had scarred over but never truly healed. For nearly 80 years, the worst physical evidence of what happened stayed buried, almost literally in the dirt, behind the hotel. Then, in 2019, a landscaper working the grounds struck something with his shovel that wasn't soil. Glass. Dozens of bottles. Then dozens more. Eventually, hundreds were pulled from the ground. When investigators examined them, some still held remnants of Baker's old tonic, the miracle cure that cured nothing. Others were worse. Preserved tissue, tumor samples, specimens taken from real human beings, sealed in glass and left in the earth behind a hotel that by then had been hosting weddings, birthdays, and overnight guests for decades. People had been sleeping in rooms upstairs while just outside, the physical remains of Baker's victims sat buried under the grass they walked across every morning. Today, the Crescent Hotel doesn't hide its past. It leans into it. Ghost tours run nightly, walking guests directly past the old morgue room. The same autopsy table, the same walk-in cooler, preserved almost exactly as Baker left them, like a museum no one chose to build. And the stories haven't stopped. Guests report a nurse pushing an empty gurney down a hallway, then vanishing before she reaches the end of it. Staff describe sudden cold spots in specific rooms, patches of air that feel wrong, that make the hair on your arms stand up for no reason you can explain. Footsteps are heard in locked, empty rooms. Doors that were closed are found open. Lights flicker in patterns too deliberate to feel random. Some guests say they've heard something else entirely, a faint, rhythmic sound from below the floor, almost like wheels rolling across tile. The same sound staff once described generations ago coming from a basement that was supposed to be empty. Some believe it's the patients, still waiting for a cure that was never coming, still trapped in the last place they trusted before everything went wrong. Some believe it's Baker himself, still walking the halls of the kingdom he built out of other people's deaths, unwilling even now to let it go. Norman Baker promised dying people a miracle. What he actually built was a morgue with a 5-star view and a basement that, by some accounts, has never fully emptied. So the next time you check into an old, beautiful hotel and something about it feels just slightly wrong, ask what used to be in the basement. You might not like the answer.